Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, welcome back to the channel, and there's been a lot of discussion about 10.6 and the changes it's brought to the meta, and whether the meta is good and balanced and all that kind of stuff. I even made a community post on my own channel asking for your guys' thoughts and stuff, and I've given my own thoughts in other videos as well. But Inbound recently made a video. If you haven't subscribed to his channel, do it right now. He makes very good content. He puts out like guides and stuff like that, as well as like informational gameplays and all that kind of stuff. Pro support in the Pro League, obviously, for the Gilded Gladiators. And yeah, he's part of this video kind of just talking about like the general state of the meta and stuff like that. And I always love these kind of videos where people share their thoughts on how they think the game is right now. I think it's good that everyone kind of gets their thoughts out there, and you know, Hi-Rez can kind of take that in and make changes if needed, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I just thought I'd do a little reaction to it. It's lazy content, I know, but I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on the situation. I think it's always nice to have these kind of discussions, so let's just jump right in.
What is going on, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing fantastic.
Oh, yo, wait. Same mic.
Today is going to be a little bit of just a talking video. I'm just going to be talking over the meta, what last patch looked like, what current patch looks like, just how I view the game, the meta, all that good stuff. Mario kick on the Subway Surfers, toss it into the screen right next to me. It's going to be kind of a just rambling video, but I do hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, dude, that Subway Surfer shit, like every single YouTube short or TikTok where someone's talking about something, there's just unrelated Subway Surfers going on in the background. I have no idea why. It's like back in like the old like 2016 YouTube days when like Leafy videos, like you just have like CSGO like parkour in the background where he's talking about something completely unrelated. It's kind of funny, dude.
You guys, any questions, any thoughts that you think I have on something, ask in the comments below. Yeah, I'm just gonna be rambling a little bit. Smite is always chasing this balance. The balance between all 5 roles, all 5 classes, tanks, and squishies. And I think this current patch has actually entered into a pretty good state of balance. Last patch, auras dominated in support. You played for Omega late game. Comeback mechanics were crazy with shutdown kills giving you thousands and thousands of gold and
yeah, dude, last patch was kind of just absolutely nuts with how like late the games are going. The thing is, I've had a lot of really long games this patch as well. I recently played 2 games. Decided to pick Loki both times. One was solo, one was jungle. I am actually a bit of a Loki enjoyer. I know you might hate me for that, but I do enjoy a bit of Loki. But not 2 hours of Loki in 2 games. Each game was like 53 minutes. So I almost played 2 straight hours of Loki just in 2 games. I was not prepared for that when I locked him in. So I've had some long games this patch as well. It feels like in general the games are shorter, but some of them just go ridiculously long because it feels like with a lot of the damage removed from the game, it's hard to actually get a clean fight where you can kill everyone because like the tanks will often escape or something like that, or maybe like a bruiser jungler will escape. And also taking objectives is just generally harder, you know, there's less damage in the game, so it's a little bit harder to siege phoenixes, take fire giant, that kind of stuff. There were other measures put into the game in this patch that like kind of helped that, you know, fire giant lasting longer, beacons, obviously, unleashed titans, although I feel like unleashed titans really have like no impact on the game. I don't know if they should make them happen more than once per match or something like that, but it feels like they happen too early, if anything. Like, when the Titans get unleashed, it feels like the game isn't ready to kind of end or, like, properly siege with them, and so it ends up being just, like, a team fight happens around them, maybe a tower gets taken, maybe very rarely a phoenix gets taken, and that's kind of it. It doesn't really actually, like, end the game or anything like that, so it feels like those are a little bit unimpactful. But yeah, in terms of the snowball mechanics as well, good to see them reduced in this patch for sure. I think he goes on to talk about it a little more in the video, so I'll play his thoughts on it as well. But yeah, it just leads to games where like you play the first 10 to 15, maybe even the first 20 minutes way better than the enemy team. You get like a 7k lead, and then it just doesn't really amount to anything because of how much anti-snowballing was in the game with the chests and the shutdown bounty. You know, you're like 10-1, you've been dominating the whole early game. Someone kills you once, and the entire enemy team gets like 300-400 gold in their pockets, and that just like really helps them catch up a lot. Same thing with the chest as well. You know, every time you proc the chest, you're just getting like 300-400 gold. It's just ridiculous. And yeah, a lot of that got nerfed in 10.6, so it's a little bit easier to kind of build and maintain a lead without just getting completely obliterated by like one shutdown or something like that.
XP, chests, which were probably one of the worst additions into the entire competitive landscape of Smite, maybe ever. I know casuals did like it a little bit because it never really felt like a game was out of reach. That's kind of a problem in a game like Smite and a MOBA where no game is out of reach. Then what's the point of even playing the early game? If you lose the early game, you should just be kind of losing the game.
Yeah, I agree mostly on this take. It shouldn't be that just if you win the early game, you win guaranteed, but you should be heavily favored in that game, you know. There's no point, as he says, in playing an early game. If, 20 minutes in, things basically just equalize, and it's whoever plays for the better late game, whether it's their comp or like their team synergy or whatever, whoever just like plays better for late game team fights wins. There's no point in really like the laning phase or, taking early objectives, trying to play around, skirmish fights in the early game, which I do like a lot. I like late game 5v5 team fights as well, but I honestly prefer the little skirmishes and ganks and stuff that go on in the early and mid game. That's how I like to play, to be honest.
Unless the other team kind of throws. There shouldn't be this inherent free comeback mechanic, which I think the chests kind of caused. It was just a way to kind of keep you in the game and always kind of give you a fighting chance. That on top of Fire Giant only lasting 3 minutes. Even if you did get to that mid game, Fires didn't last very long. You had to set up for a bunch of different...
Yeah, it was really hard to actually get anything done with a Fire Giant. It feels like by the time you take it, and maybe you have to back to either spend some gold or heal up, and then by the time you actually get to sieging, you've got like a minute of your Fire Giant left, and it's like, yeah, that's kind of skill issue as well, because you probably could be a bit more efficient with the time on it and stuff like that, but it did really just feel like Fire didn't last long enough to actually get much done with it. And yeah, the chests are just completely dumb in my opinion. Shutdown rewards being high is way less egregious than the chests, because the chests are just free. Like completely free, whereas at least with a shutdown, if the enemy that you're trying to shut down is like 10-1, you're not going to be able to kill them on your own, and so you have to like get a team effort together and kill them, and then you get rewarded for that. I kind of understand that, but they were way too high last patch, and I'm glad they took them down. But the chests, I just completely hate them. Completely agree with Inbound here.
Different fires, 3 every 10 minutes. Now it's only 2, and that fire you can actually just reset off of and then start to push out after. Also, mages and hunters just kind of dominated. There was no really such thing as a tank. If the enemy did have a tank that was somewhat far ahead, they would just get sundered, and really it was just came back down to who could kill the enemy's front line first, whose back line could survive and get off enough damage where they didn't even have to worry about being in bad positioning late game, because auras just made you take 50% less damage. I actually made a video about it.
I didn't realize he made an entire video on it, but that's probably a great video as well. Yeah, auras were just so ridiculous up until recently. Just the fact that 100 prots makes you take half damage. Backliners had easily 100 prots. They often had more than 100 prots. If you had Sentinels plus Prophetic plus Thebes, they're already going to be at 100. And then if you have anything else like Lotus Sickle or Sovereignty Heartward, anything like that, they're going to be over 100 prots. So they're taking less than half of the damage. And so when everyone complains about like Hercules Driving Strike doing 300 base damage, Warriors tanks, they don't build any penetration. That's just getting like reduced by like 50-60% just by backline protection auras. And so you're actually not doing anywhere near as much damage as you would think on paper, like when you actually bring it into a real game.
Auras, if you guys are curious about why the auras were so bad, I go in depth about like the actual numbers behind it. If that is something that interests you, that video will kind of highlight a lot of the problems. But basically,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Squishers will be getting...
I'm probably going to go watch that video after this, to be honest, even though I already know exactly what he's going to talk about because I have the same feelings and I go into the math as well, but I'll probably end up watching that video afterwards.
Almost 50% mitigations with those builds, which is just crazy. Squishies should never have that in a full damage build. And those auras kind of allowed that type of play style and that type of play. This patch, 10.6, actually addressed a lot of these problems. Comeback mechanics were super nerfed. The chests were nerfed by, I think it was 1.6 down to 1.0%. So 3% right off the top, which is actually a pretty good amount. I kind of wish they nerfed it a little bit more, but it's a good start.
Not just
kill comebacks or shutdowns, whatever you want to call them, were actually nerfed a lot too, which is another nice way to kind of allow early game to be worth a little bit. They reduced power on all mage and physical items by 30%, and they reduced protections by 15%, and health usually by about 15% also. This kind of made it so power spikes mattered. The first item you get isn't really going to give you that one-shot potential where last patch, a Deso Mage, if you went Thebes first and you didn't have enough stacks, a Deso Mage would nearly be half-healthing you, and now it just kind of feels like, oh, well, like, I'm the tank early game. This guy should have to farm a little bit to actually hit me back. Same with the ADC role, even though it's a little bit more consistent because it's just more damage every second because they just have constant auto attacks. It just feels like ADCs and mages have to actually scale through the game.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. Defense is more efficient than damage. If you buy one defense item and the enemy buys one offense item, you should outtrade them. That should be how it works, especially for the early game. Late game is where, like, the mages, the hunters, assassins to a certain extent, but way less, can actually, like, take down, these guys building defense and stuff like that. Like, you really should be able to outtrade, and it shouldn't just be that the enemy mid buys one Doom Orb, it gives them 160 power when stacked and they just one-shot you. Like, that shouldn't be how it is. I'm very happy with the overall, like, power reduction, other than like a few specific cases.
Tanks kind of run that early game right now, which is perfect. That's how the game should be played. Tanks should be strong early. They should be able to kill you early game. I know that is this bizarre idea that solo laner should have no effect on the game, but solo should be the strongest role pre 20-ish minutes pre like level 15, 16, 17, maybe even pre-20. Solo laners should be kind of like the god on the battleground that if they are rotating over and yours isn't, that is a guy that is going to make them a little bit stronger. Solos fall off a lot late game. This is like the role they should be in. I don't know why people think that solo laner shouldn't be able to 1v1 a jungler in their jungle. The solo laner is playing for that part of the game. That kind of brings me to my next point, which is...
Yeah, and that's how it kind of was for like a majority of Smite's lifespan. Like the fact that solo laners were this kind of raid boss, they often got more farm. Less so now, solo laners probably just get like an equal amount of farm to most of the other carry roles, but it used to be that solos got like significantly more farm than every other role on the map pretty much. And that combined with the fact that defense is more efficient and, you know, base damage is going to be more powerful than scaling in the early game because you can rank your abilities up, you know, and get that damage out a lot faster and you can build a ton of power for like your mages and your ADC. So that's generally how it was in like the early days of Smite. And it's only been in like the last maybe 3 or 4 seasons that they've really kind of like strayed away from that.
Even though I do think solo is better now than it was last patch, I do think they do have a little bit of too much free damage. Damage from items, damage from relics, Fire Blink, and Explodey Sundering Blast. Way too much damage. Archdruids, Pridwin, Glad Shield. Probably a couple other that I'm missing. All are just adding a little bit too much damage in where solos can actually be effective late game, even while being super strong early game. I think if you scale back that for solo laners, not as much damage that they get to into the late game, I think the solo lane role will just feel as it should, which is they run the game until 20-ish minutes, we'll say 20-ish minutes, and then they start to fall off and they kind of set up for the rest of their team and they play for their mage and their ADC who, spoiler alert, should be the ones you play through late game. Now,
yeah, I mostly agree with this take. There is a little too much free damage in solo. I think it's mainly Pridwin is the main issue, to be honest. Glad Shield kind of always has been there, but like the Pridwin glyphs are just so insane that they added this patch, especially Red Pridwin, just giving that double burst of damage that does like, was it 180% of your protections as damage or something? It's kind of insane. But personally, I don't think it's that big of a problem. I do like solos being able to actually deal some damage in the late game, because if you can't threaten the backline, what are you doing as a solo laner? You're just another support at that point, just like a CC bot that tries to throw out a CC and like hope your mage and ADC follows up on it. I think, you know, in competitive play, you can get away with a solo laner being like that, but in just standard ranks and casuals where you have no communication with the rest of your team and you can't necessarily rely on your teammates, I like solo having some potential to actually do something in the backline, even in these like hyper late game team fights, and I feel like they kind of can right now. You know, if you're just W keying at like especially the ADC, you're still just going to die immediately. Like, you can't just 1v1 an ADC late game. The ADC will just shred you. It's a little bit different with mages and assassins, but tanks in general are supposed to be the counters to burst mages and burst assassins. That's supposed to be how the game works. I've talked about this in so many videos, so I won't go too in-depth on it, but basically tanks are supposed to be burst is supposed to be hunters with like sustained DPS, and then hunters are supposed to be tanks with sustained DPS. That's generally how like the game is supposed to work, and that's how the game is best balanced in my opinion. And I feel like in this patch that is kind of how it feels. You know, hunters are strong right now. I won't say they're broken, but hunters are really strong. They can still absolutely shred tanks. You know, everyone's saying that you basic attack a tank and it does 50 damage and they're doing 500 with every single ability. Like, there's so much exaggeration in this meta, I feel like. But it's exaggeration from both sides, which I feel maybe means it's a balanced meta. You get a lot of people saying, oh, I'm an ADC main, I can't possibly kill anyone, or oh, I'm a tank main, I get shredded immediately. And that probably means that it's a balanced meta and people are just massively over-exaggerating like the bad like times that they've died. And for the most part, every single role can do something, and that's kind of what this patch feels like. I feel like every role is very much able to do stuff in this patch, whereas before, kind of wasn't the case.
Getting to the jungle role. I think jungle right now actually feels rather impactful. In the last patch, junglers just ruined every game. They would dictate early game, mid game, and late game. They were the strongest role on the map at almost all points.
I disagree with the late game. You know, junglers, they can absolutely assassinate late game, especially some of the more late game focused big damage junglers like Susano, Kali, Alquang, that kind of stuff, but I would say that mages and hunters run the late game, not necessarily junglers. But yeah, junglers, as it always has been, determine a lot of the early and mid-game fights and pressure and where the fights happen and stuff like that, because they're the roaming role. Supports roam as well, but junglers are really the ones that kind of pick what happens on the map, especially in the early game with ganks and stuff like that. And that's just inherent in a MOBA, you know, that the jungler is going to be everywhere, and the jungler is going to pick what fights they want to take, whereas if you just sat in a lane, you don't necessarily pick fights, particularly. And so that's how it's always going to be. And I think that's fine that the jungler has a little bit more influence on the early and mid game. And I think they do fall off decently late game unless you're specifically on like a late game jungler pick. So I think that's completely fine.
A late game where maybe the ADC or the mage is stronger or both were stronger, but at that point it should be the mage and the ADC that dictate play. You should have to outplay them a tiny bit or pull a relic first and then punish that relic to be able to be as effective. Or you split the map and 1v1 the other jungler, unless you're playing like a late game jungler, but that's just stuff that doesn't really matter too much. Junglers on this current patch don't just one-shot tanks when they walk into their lane. Their Jotuns doesn't give them 40 power, flat pen, cooldown. Now it's 30 power flat pen cooldown, which is still crazy in my opinion. I don't know why Jotuns is 20% cooldown.
Jotuns is insane, dude. Always has been. There's no other item in the game that gives you, like, every single stat that you could possibly want as, like, a first item, you know? Yeah, Jotuns is just insane. I think it's kind of fine that it's better than most starting items because junglers kind of need that to, like, actually have, like, a presence and stuff like that in the early game. But yeah, Jotuns is insane.
Power, pen, and it's 2,200 gold. Kind of crazy. I do think that their late game is maybe a tiny bit too weak. I think Heartseeker and a couple of their power items, Deathbringer, which is a hunter item too, but I'm going to toss it into this assassin tree. I think those items are a bit too weak, and I think Spectral as an aura is unhealthy when it's giving your teammates power back or giving you power back, when that is the entire point of the Spectral. It's to make you tanky. It's not supposed to also make you do more damage, and I think that's where the flaw with Spectral is. My opinion with crit and anti-crit has always been, crit should kill everyone on the map except people who are itemizing for Spectral. Spectral should be a true counter to crit. Crit shouldn't allow you to shred through tanks. That's Kinz's job. That's other damage job, Odibo, stuff like that. That allows you to shred a little bit more. But if you're building just...
Yeah, this is a balance that Hi-Rez used to have very right in the early days of the game, but... And they've kind of returned to it a little bit more since the crit nerfs and the kin size change as well, where they made it less effective against squishies. But it felt like for a good couple of seasons, they just... Crit and Kins did both really well in terms of shredding tanks and bursting squishies. Crit should be the itemization you go if you're looking to target squishies a little bit more. You'll still do decent damage to tanks because you're a hunter, you have consistent DPS, you have a lot of access to percent pen. But that's part of the problem, you know, when we had that major crit meta, it was because every crit item pretty much had attack speed on it or percent pen on it or something like that. And you didn't even need to build these items that you would typically throw into a Kin Shred build, you know, like the Kin Shred builds we're seeing right now. Like that is... You are itemizing to kill a tank there. You are building Kins. You are building maximum percent pen. You may be even, quote, overcapping percent pen. You're not overcapping percent pen, but you have stuff that bypasses it, like Dominance because it's basic attack pen, Executioner because it's proc reduction and not percent pen. And so when you build like Xe, Dominance, Titan's Bane, Kin Size, and then like Starter and like Oboe or something, that is the tank shred build. If you are deleting tanks with that build late game, good job. That is your job. Like, that is what your role should be doing. That is completely fine. If I get CC'd for like 2 or 3 seconds and a hunter with a build that is itemized to kill me, I should die. That is completely fine. But if I'm getting CC'd for 2 seconds in the late game against a hunter that is itemizing to kill squishies and has almost like no other items in their build other than just basically crit, and they're getting 3% pen and attack speed from those crit items, and they're still able to kill me immediately, that's where the problem arises. And, you know, a similar thing on the reverse, where, like, if they're building a full shred build to delete tanks and they're still killing squishies in, like, 5 autos, that was why the Kins change was made. You know, Kins now does way less to squishy targets. And they've kind of, yeah, with these changes to the crit and the kin size change, they've kind of come a little bit more back to that duality of, like, what do you want to itemize into as an ADC? Do you want to target tanks more? Do you want to target squishies more? And you don't just get every single stat basically at the stat cap, no matter what you build, basically.
Crit and all your damage is crit and you don't have a Kins, why are you in your build that is itemized to just kill squishies supposed to kill the tank? It's never something that really made sense to me. Or if you did kill me, it should take a little bit extra time. Since we just talked about assassins, it's kind of the same tree. We'll go to hunters. Hunters are in a perfect spot. We'll actually talk about mages and hunters at the same time, because right now they are both pretty ineffective early game. You need probably 3 items for hunters to start to feel okay with like a devs Xe Kins. And then you need probably 5, 6 items for a mage to feel effective, which is kind of how the...
Yeah, and Kins comes online faster than crit builds as well. You know, with crit builds, you need at least a couple of crit items online to be, like, properly online. You usually got, like, starter, devs, into, like, a bridge item of some kind, 2 crit items, and then you kind of online. Kins comes online a little bit faster than crit.
Game is. The games and the gods should be like that. That is how the game of Smite is viewed at as a MOBA. These gods should not be doing so much damage early game. They should need something to scale.
Yeah, especially the ADC role. I'm a little bit more okay with mages having more early game damage, because they do have a lot of like early game skirmish fights, and the mid needs to be able to blow people up in like these early game fights when like you're fighting around beacon and like the skirmish 3v3s and stuff like that. But ADCs absolutely should not be having like insane damage in the early game. He's completely right on that.
Kin's doing 3% of max health at 2k health never ever made sense to me. Every god in the game got to that. So there's just no point.
Oh yeah, every god in the game gets way above 2,000 health since the changes, like where everyone has more health. Like late game, squishies get like 2.3k health or something like that just from base health alone. And so Kin's size got like semi-buffed for that reason, and they had to change it. And like now it's more reasonable where it's not completely deleting squishies as well as tanks.
Of having this item worth this low end, because
like in a perfect world, you would really have to make a choice, and both will be viable in terms of crit and Kins. You really want to make that choice of like, oh, this team comp looks like those tanks are going to be diving pretty hardcore, and I'm going to have to deal with them. Let's go a Kin Shred build, or like the tank's going to be a problem. I'll do that. Or, oh, these tanks, maybe they've got like a backline defensive support like Kepri that I don't have to worry about too much, and I've got a lot of peel or something, so I can maybe go for a little bit more of that damage on squishies, and then we can just clean up the tanks later on. That should be a choice that you make. It shouldn't just be this build is better with Kins, or this build is better with crit, and it does both jobs super effectively, and they've gotten back to that quite a lot.
Everybody made it to that point. But now at 1.5% up to 2250 gold, Kin's no longer is effective against squishies. It is now ineffective against squishies. If you're getting dove by the assassin, your Kins is doing, I mean, if it's a full damage assassin, your Kins is doing 30 damage, which was what the item should be doing. It shouldn't be doing 60 damage every auto. So then the pen build is just effective against everyone. And I think Hires is finally starting to kind of realize some of these things. And I think that's why this Masters actually felt so good, even though we did lose super early in embarrassing fashion. The game still
don't worry, I'm bad. You got this. You can make a comeback with the Glads. I believe in you. But yeah, the Masters felt absolutely brilliant to watch. I watched definitely not all the games. I want to say I watched maybe like 40 or 50% of the games. I just simply don't have enough time to watch. Like, this Masters had so many different teams because they had SEC teams as well. But I watched a lot of like the most important games, and it was super fun to watch, dude. Like, every game felt different. It felt like every team had their own style, and every single role was viable. So like certain teams that want to play around a certain player in a certain role got to shine in terms of like, making sure that role can get done what it needs to get done, and that player can kind of like hard carry and stuff like that. And it felt like almost every single role, probably every single role to be honest, could be played around and carry through like their own unique playstyle instead of everyone just playing the same meta. And I think that is indicative of a balanced meta. It could also be that they didn't have too much time to scrim on this new patch. They had longer than we did as the casual plebs. They got access to it earlier because Smite Masters was going to be played on 10.6. And so a little bit of it could be attributed to that. People aren't really used to the patch yet. The full, like, best meta hasn't developed yet, so teams are just kind of playing what they like to play. But I think a lot of it is down to the fact that it's a balanced meta and you can make a lot of different things work.
Feels in a healthy spot. I know not everyone is going to always love every meta, but I think this one just feels very, very good from a competitive point of view and a ranked point of view. I've actually had some of my most fun games in ranked this year on this patch. This entire year, I'm getting the most fun games right now. And then lastly, we'll touch on supports. Auras have now...
Yeah, I would agree in terms of, like, ranked has been pretty fun this year. I'm having a terrible time in this new patch. I don't think it's necessarily related to the patch, though. I think I just... maybe we can save me. I'm kind of stuck in Elo hell this time, dude. I started at, like, I don't know what, like, Diamond 4 Elo or something like that. And then I lost my first, like, 3 games. I think I'm 1-7 right now. And my MMR is now, like, low plat. I should not be in low plat games, dude. It's painful. It's painful. But ranked rant is not what this video is about.
I've been moved down a little bit where they're still okay. If that's kind of how your comp wants to be played, you want to be playing front to back. Peel for your squishies. They don't have a lot of pen built into their kits. They have like double tank dive. That build is going to feel really, really good. If you're playing a healer and you have a compassion and you can peel your team that way, or you can be playing dive with war flag and Sunder and Fire Blink. Like I said, maybe a little bit too much damage on Sunder and Blink, but it still feels like you have multiple different ways to play the game as a support. Now that I've kind of touched on every role,
and it feels like that for
what would I change? What about 10.6? Still feels just slightly off. I think mages need a little bit more power back. I think 30% right off the top, right off the rip on a class that does very, very little auto attack damage. Like, let's put it this way. Mages are all ability power. That's all their kit is. It's all abilities and how much power they do. Hunters and assassins, they have the auto attack damage that they can actually weave in where their damage doesn't feel as effective.
Yeah, magical basic attack scaling 20%, physical basic attack scaling 100%. Magicals get maybe 2.5 to 3 times the amount of power, maybe even a little bit less than that, maybe like 2 to 2.5 times the amount of power in their build. Those numbers don't add up. You know, even if a mage has 3 times the amount of power that an assassin has, they're, you know, essentially that 20% becomes 60% versus the 100% that physicals have in terms of power scaling. So the autos are always going to hit harder for physicals. That's just simply how it is because they scale so much harder. And even on assassins, you know, most good assassins can get some kind of air cancels in or just like a little few autos extra while they're chasing. Mages don't do that, dude. Like, oftentimes on certain mages, you know, maybe like Hebo or something like that, you don't even want to be basic attacking because it just slows you down and doesn't really give you enough damage. You'd be better off just, like, juking, waiting for ability cooldowns and stuff like that. So, mages, heavily reliant on power, and I agree that they should get a little bit of power back. I think it suggests 10 power per, like, item. Yeah, pretty much I would agree with that. I think mage power is in, like, a little bit of a weak spot right now. I wouldn't go too overboard because I think mages are still strong right now, but like part of that could just be down to proc items, you know, E-Staff and Reaver mainly.
Or as affected. So when you nerf 30% off of mages, you're hitting just all their damage. When you're doing 30% off of hunters, who are only getting 400 power maximum, like if they build full AMC Uller pen build, they're getting only 400. Going down to 300 and still weaving in auto attacks is going to feel just fine. I think...
Yeah, the auto attack point's correct, but a little bit of a miss on the fact that, like, they have less power because it should be like a percentage-based thing. You know, if you're taking down their power by a certain percentage, it will affect them the same because, like, how scalings work and stuff like that. But, yeah, hunters especially because they rely much more on item effects and attack speed, especially with the current build. You know, it's just max out your pen, max out your attack speed, and rely on Kin's damage. You don't really even care that much about how much power you have in the current hunter build. Power in crit builds matters a lot more, obviously, because crit builds, you know, you're wanting to get your auto attack damage, the base damage of them as high as you can because it's doubling. But in Kin Shred builds, you literally barely care about how much power you have. It's just ancillary. And so Hunters barely got affected by the changes, which is why I think they're in a pretty good spot right now. You know, they were one of the weaker roles. I think after tanks, then it was ADCs, then it was Burst in terms of mages and assassins last patch. And in this patch, you know, Burst got nerfed more heavily than Hunters and tanks got buffed. And I feel like it's put the game in a really balanced spot, basically. 10
power onto every mage ability, or sorry, every mage item. Deso bring it up to 80. Divine bring it up to 80. Book, my goodness.
Book,
every
dude.
Patch over this season, I guess.
Yeah, Book has just been decimated, dude. It's like that meme of like, stop it, he's already dead. Like, they nerfed Book, and then it was kind of like, okay. And then they nerfed it again, and it was Garbo. And then they nerfed it again, and it's just unusable unless you can call can. Like, Book is just dead, dude. Warlocks gives everything Book gives, but just better, aside from the infinite mana. But you've got mana elsewhere in your build. As long as you're a little bit careful, you don't need Book of Thoth to have enough mana to cast your abilities. Book is just so dead, dude. I can't believe they nerfed it even more in this patch. Like, they could have just taken some base power off of it, and it would have been absolutely fine. But they also nerfed the power conversion, and it's just like, why? The item is so dead now.
Every patch has been, yeah, let's just bring Book down a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. You stay at the same power when you finish Book. Also, don't get me started on the tier 2 items. That should have never happened. It is inexcusable having your tier 2 items to be better than your tier 3 items, or more power. Even if you're paying for the passive, it just doesn't make...
Looks so unprofessional, dude. Tier 2 items having more power than tier 3 items. How it takes like one brain cell of forethought from one person at high risk to realize that's going to be an issue. I don't even know if they fixed it yet, to be honest. It's the same with the Unleashed Titans making Fire Giant sound. Like, really? I know they're not a huge company, but they're a pretty big company. Surely one person at Hi-Res thought, oh, we should probably record or generate a different sound for Unleashed Titans instead of making it play the Fire Giant sound, which was almost certainly like a testing placeholder that they just never changed. Went through PTS, I pointed out many times, I'm sure other people pointed it out. Hi-Res just like, nah, let's just launch the patch with it still playing Fire Giant sound. It's like, it's not that big of a deal because now at this point I'm used to it. If I hear Fire Giant pop and I don't hear the announcer say enemy team has destroyed Fire Giant, I'm like, oh, it's Titan time. But it's just so terrible that, like, that takes that long to change. Like, are they waiting for a main patch to change that? You can't just hotfix it? Surely that would take one person a few hours to hotfix. I mean, I'm not a game dev. Maybe it'd take a bit longer than that because they have to push a patch and stuff like that. But it's something that absolutely should be changed. And the tier 2 items is the same. You know, it looks so bad when tier 2 Spear has, like, 60 power and then... Actually, I think Spear's not one of them. But like when an item has like say 50 power and then you upgrade it and it goes down to 40 power, that just looks so terrible.
Make any sense. But yeah, Book is like 97 power now for a stacking item. Warlocks is 110 with health and percent pen. Like, okay. All right. Mages, give them a little bit more power. I think you bring E-Staff down a little bit with that. Bring it back down.
Absolutely, dude. E-Staff's broken right now. E-Staff's so broken. Not only did they buff the amount it steals from 6% to 8%, so like a 33% buff on like the amount of like health it's stealing, everyone also has like generally less damage, so like that proc is more valuable in like relation to your total damage outputs. Like E-Staff is just nuts right now, so is Reaver, but E-Staff's better
6% and then give them more power across the board. Let them reach 700 power, 750 power, and then with EFG, FG, 3k pots, then they can be hitting the 900, maybe even the 1000 power again. But I do think they should be getting an extra 60, 70, 80, 90 power in their builds. I've touched on it a little bit, but reduce item and relic damage from the frontline builds. Nerf a couple of them. Bring them maybe all down just a tiny bit. 5.
I don't think they all need to be brought down. I think Pribwin is the main issue. Bluestone has been in the game for a long time in its current state, and it was never really a problem. Same thing with Gladshield. I think Pribwin has mainly just like pushed solo over the top a little bit. Arc Druids as well, because if you're building all of them in one build, you kind of hit a critical mass where it's enough damage to solo a backliner. So maybe Arc Druids, like Pribwin, nerf it substantially. Maybe nerf Arc Druids a little bit. And then I think you're kind of fine.
Damage off of all of them, 10 damage off of all of them, something like that, just to touch it a little bit. Lastly, we have Masters this weekend, and we still have the top 4 teams to play. We had a lot of exciting Smite. It sucks that I'm not there.
Yeah, who are the top 4 teams? Is it Dragons, Ferrymen, Warriors? Oh, I can't remember the 4th team, but yeah, those are definitely games I'm going to watch. As I said, I didn't really have the time to watch every single game of Masters in like the earlier games, but these final 4, like, which is essentially semi-finals at Worlds, you know, but it's obviously not Worlds. This is definitely something I'm going to watch, you know. The only Warriors set's going to be super hype. Ferrymen have been doing really well. Dragons just popped off for no reason. Like, Dragons were struggling the whole season, and it seems like they finally clicked in terms of their team comps and stuff. So I'm very excited to see that.
Plan, but we had a lot of exciting Smite played last week, and we still have the top 4 teams to see play. I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm going to be watching those games live over on my Twitch. The game starts Saturday. I think it's 11 a.m. Best of 5s. If you guys are curious about the...
Should I live stream the SPL games, boys? That could be fun, right? Let me know in the comments down below. Would you be interested in my annoying voice over the top of the SPL games, or would you just watch them? Let me know down below.
Those games, I'm going to be streaming them live. You can come check it out. That's all I got for the video. Let me know who you guys think is going to win in Smite Masters. My prediction, Oni Warriors.
Yeah, it's just going to be Oni Warriors. Like, you can't really bet against the Oni Warriors at this point. You know, they're going to win until they don't. And then when they don't, we'll see which kind of teams are beating them and that sort of stuff. Because they won't keep winning forever. But yeah, until they lose, you're just safe betting on Oni Warriors. But yeah, great video. I love watching these kind of ones where like people just voice their thoughts on the meta. I like getting it out there. You know, I do the same thing. I make just like meta videos where I'm essentially just ranting like this to the camera, just talking about like what I think about like patches and stuff like that. I think it's good to like get thoughts out there. Of course, let me know your own thoughts on the meta down below. Do you think it's balanced? Do you think anything's too strong, too weak? You know, what would you change? All that kind of stuff. And of course, go subscribe to Inbound's YouTube channel if you haven't already. He puts out some great content, stuff like this, discussing the game, puts out guides, puts out informative gameplays. I think he does patch notes reviews as well. He's only at like 11k subs or something like that, so pump him up a little bit, boys. We'll send the Nation over and hopefully get him a few hundred extra subscribers or something like that. Definitely worth subscribing to this channel. You know, I'm not just saying that to like send you over, but like genuinely I think you will enjoy this channel. He's got some similar content to mine in a lot of ways. So yeah, go do that and subscribe to my channel if you're not already, of course. So we should be promoting my own as well. But yeah, I will catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day and peace out, you nerds.